Flight attendant slaps black triplets, speechless when their mother reveals who she is. You little animals need to learn some manners. The flight attendant yelled at 3 black kids with uncontrolled anger. That slap is just to make sure you learn some lessons, she said. The 11-year-old black girl stood frozen, his hands still holding the empty cup that had slipped from his grasp moments before, spilling juice across the attendant's uniform. Her words hung in the air, a stark reminder of how racism had wormed its way into every corner of society, even at 30,000 feet where children traveled to celebrate family. The triplets, 3 black children with faces now frozen in shock, could hardly believe what had just happened. They were supposed to be enjoying this trip, flying to Chicago to meet their uncle's newborn twins, a joyful family celebration. But to the flight attendant standing over them with fury in her eyes, their presence, their mere existence in the first-class section of the plane, had already been judged. They weren't supposed to be treated with care when accidents happened. Not because they'd done something terrible, but because they were black. It wasn't the first time they'd been looked at differently because of their skin color. But this? Being struck by an adult, an authority figure, someone who was supposed to keep them safe? This was different. The boy whose face was already reddening from the slap, his sister, and his other brother exchanged glances, the weight of the moment sinking in. They had every right to be on this plane, every right to be treated with basic human decency when a cup slipped. Yet here they were, being physically assaulted for something they couldn't change. The confined space of the aircraft suddenly felt smaller, more suffocating. Around them, first-class passengers had gone silent. Some had their phones out, recording, the little red lights blinking steadily. A businessman in a suit looked uncomfortable but said nothing. An elderly white couple whispered to each other but didn't intervene. A young woman covered her mouth in shock but her voice stayed silent. Everyone watched. Everyone saw. Nobody helped. "I'm sorry," the boy whispered, tears forming in his eyes, his cheek burning where she'd hit him. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to spill it on you." "Accident?" The flight attendant's voice dripped with contempt. "You people always have excuses. Always causing problems." The girl, one of the triplets, stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Please, ma'am. He really didn't mean it. We're just trying to get to Chicago to see our uncle's new babies. Please don't be mad at us." The flight attendant's expression hardened. She raised her hand again and the girl flinched, but the slap came anyway, striking her across the face with the same vicious force. The third child, the other boy, tried to grab his siblings, tried to shield them, but the attendant's hand found him too. 3 children. 3 slaps. 3 red marks blooming on young black faces while passengers watched in silence. "We didn't do anything wrong," the first boy sobbed, holding his burning cheek. "Why are you hitting us?" The flight attendant leaned down, her face close to theirs. "Because you need to learn respect. You need to learn your place." Before we continue with the story, welcome to Hyper Racism Channel, where we expose the truth about racial profiling of black people in America, truths the airline industry would rather keep hidden. They don't want us to reach a wide audience, but we're not backing down. Let's make sure the truth gets out. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can reach millions with the facts they've tried to bury. Thanks for hitting that subscribe button and supporting our channel. 30,000 feet in the air, trapped in metal seats they couldn't escape, 3 11-year-old children huddled together crying while the adult who'd assaulted them stood over them with satisfaction. And all around them, passengers recorded but didn't speak. Witnessed but didn't intervene. Saw children being abused and chose their comfort over those children's safety. If you believe no child should ever be slapped by an adult for accidentally spilling a drink, keep watching. If you think physical violence against black children on airplanes is something we left in the past, you need to see what happens next. And if you've ever been hit, humiliated, or abused by someone in authority while others watched and did nothing, drop a comment below and tell us your story. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. We're reading every single one because your pain matters. This story doesn't end the way you think. What happens when these children's mother arrives and reveals who she really is will shock everyone on that plane. Stay with us. You won't believe what comes next. But to understand how 3 11-year-old children ended up being slapped by a flight attendant at 30,000 feet, we need to go back 6 hours to that morning when everything still felt full of excitement and possibility. Their names were Marcus, Maya, and Michael Carter. Triplets, born 11 years ago within 20 minutes of each other at Chicago Memorial Hospital. Marcus was the oldest by 7 minutes, always trying to be responsible, the protector of his siblings. Maya was the middle child, artistic and sensitive, the one who noticed when people were upset. Michael was the youngest, curious and talkative, the one who made everyone laugh. They were 6th graders at Lincoln Elementary in Detroit, all 3 on the honor roll, all 3 involved in after-school programs. Marcus played basketball. Maya was in the art club. Michael was on the debate team. They were good kids. The kind teachers loved having in class. Polite, raised to say please and thank you, taught to respect adults and follow rules. Their parents, David and Jennifer Carter, had worked hard to give them a stable, loving home. David was an attorney. Jennifer was a pediatric nurse. But more than their jobs, more than their success, they'd focused on raising children who were kind, confident, and proud of who they were. This trip to Chicago was special. Their uncle Marcus, their father's younger brother, had just become a father himself. Twin girls, born 3 days ago, healthy and beautiful. The whole family was gathering for a traditional naming ceremony, a celebration of new life and family bonds. The triplets had been counting down the days, so excited to meet their baby cousins, to be big kids helping with the babies, to see family they hadn't seen in months. That morning, they'd woken up early, too excited to sleep late. They'd packed their bags carefully the night before. Marcus brought the basketball jersey he wanted to show his uncle. Maya packed the drawings she'd made for the baby's nursery. Michael brought his debate trophy to show everyone. They'd also packed the matching outfits their grandmother had sent for the ceremony, special clothes that made them feel grown up and important. Their mother had made them breakfast, pancakes with their names spelled out in chocolate chips, a special tradition for important days. She'd gone over the rules one more time even though they'd heard them 100 times already. Stay together. Listen to the flight attendants. Be polite. Don't run on the plane. Call as soon as you land. Your father will pick you up at O'Hare, she told them, adjusting Marcus's collar, smoothing Maya's braids, straightening Michael's jacket. Grandma and Grandpa will be at the house. Uncle Marcus can't wait to see you. And remember, you're representing our family. Make us proud. We will, Mama, they'd chorus together, the way they often did, finishing each other's thoughts the way twins and triplets sometimes could. She'd driven them to Detroit Metro Airport herself, these 3 children who were her whole world, watching them bounce with excitement in the back seat. At the terminal, she'd hugged each of them tight, made them promise again to stay together, to be good, to call. They were flying alone for the first time, old enough now, responsible enough. She trusted them. But she was still their mother, still worried, still wanting to protect them from everything. Check-in had been smooth. The gate agent had smiled at them, processed their unaccompanied minor paperwork, put special lanyards around their necks. Security had been easy. TSA agents had been patient, even friendly. At the gate, they'd sat together, sharing snacks their mother had packed, playing games on Michael's tablet, watching other passengers and making up stories about where everyone was going. When boarding was called, they'd gathered their things and walked down the jetway holding hands, a habit from when they were little that they hadn't quite grown out of. The plane was a newer Boeing 737, clean and modern. They'd found their seats, 12A, 12B, and 12C, 3 across in economy. Window, middle, They'd argued playfully about who got which seat before Marcus, being the oldest, insisted his siblings take window and aisle while he took the middle. Other passengers had boarded around them. A businessman who barely glanced their way. A young family with a toddler. College students with backpacks and headphones. Most of the flight crew had been pleasant. A young male flight attendant had helped them stow their bags and told them to push the call button if they needed anything. Another attendant, an older woman with kind eyes, had brought them each a cup of water without being asked. But then she had appeared. The flight attendant who would change everything. White woman, maybe late 40s, blonde hair pulled back tight, her expression neutral as she checked overhead bins and welcomed passengers. When she'd reached row 12, when she'd seen 3 black children sitting together in economy, something had shifted in her eyes. Something cold and dismissive. "You 3 traveling alone?" she'd asked, her tone already different from how she'd spoken to other passengers. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus had answered politely. "We're going to Chicago to see our uncle's new babies." The attendant had looked them over with an expression that made Maya uncomfortable, like they were being judged and found wanting. "Well, try to keep the noise down. Some passengers are trying to rest." "We will, ma'am," Marcus had said, even though they hadn't been making any noise at all. She'd walked away but glanced back at them twice, her expression suggesting she expected problems. And that's when the triplets had felt it, that familiar uncomfortable feeling they'd experienced before. The sense that someone had decided they were trouble before they'd done anything at all. The plane had taken off smoothly. The triplets had looked out the window as Detroit disappeared below them, excited about the adventure, about seeing family, about being old enough to fly alone. They'd been good. Quiet. Reading, playing games on the tablet with headphones, coloring in the activity books their mother had packed. An hour into the flight, Michael had asked for juice. Marcus had pressed the call button, waited for a flight attendant. The kind older woman had come, smiled at them, and brought 3 cups of apple juice. The triplets had thanked her politely, taken the cups carefully. And that's when it happened. As Marcus reached across to hand Michael his cup, his elbow had bumped the seat in front of him. The cup had tilted, just slightly, just enough. Juice had splashed out, mostly onto the tray table, but a few drops had caught the edge of the aisle just as the other flight attendant, the cold one, had been walking past. Juice had splattered onto her uniform. Not much. A few drops. Barely noticeable. But she'd stopped, looked down at her skirt, and her face had transformed into something ugly and furious. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice loud enough for the whole section to hear. "I'm so sorry," Marcus had stammered, his face flushing with embarrassment. "It was an accident. I'm really sorry." And that's when her hand moved. Vicious. The slap that would echo through that cabin and change everything. The sound had been like a gunshot in the confined space. And every passenger who heard it, who saw it, who recorded it on their phones would have to live with the knowledge that they'd witnessed child abuse and done nothing to stop it. Maya watched her brother Marcus hold his burning cheek, tears streaming down his face, and something protective surged in her chest. She stepped toward the flight attendant, her voice shaking but determined. "Please, ma'am. It really was an accident. He didn't mean to spill the juice. We're so sorry. Please don't be angry." The flight attendant turned her cold gaze on Maya. "Oh, so now you want to talk back to me? You want to defend your brother's bad behavior?" "I'm not talking back," Maya said quickly, fear creeping into her voice. "I'm just trying to explain. It was an accident. We're really, really sorry." The flight attendant's hand moved again, faster than Maya could react. The slap caught her across the face with the same vicious force that had hit Marcus. Maya stumbled backward into her seat, her hand flying to her cheek, shock and pain flooding through her. Michael, the youngest, watched his siblings get hit and felt something break inside him. "Stop it," he said, his voice small but desperate. "Please stop hitting us. We said we're sorry. Please." The flight attendant leaned down to his level, her face twisted with contempt. "Are you giving me attitude, boy?" "No, ma'am," Michael whispered, but it was too late. Her hand struck him too, the 3rd slap in less than 2 minutes. 3 children. 3 red marks blooming on their faces. 3 hearts breaking with the understanding that they were being punished not for what they'd done but for who they were. Around them, the cabin remained silent. The businessman in the suit looked down at his laptop. The elderly couple whispered but didn't intervene. The young woman with her phone kept recording but said nothing. Passenger after passenger witnessed 3 children being physically assaulted and chose to do nothing. Their silence was its own violence, their inaction its own crime. The triplets huddled together in their seats, crying quietly, trying to understand what had just happened. Marcus pulled his siblings close, his role as protector kicking in even though he was just as scared and hurt as they were. Maya sobbed into her brother's shoulder. Michael shook, his whole body trembling with fear and pain. "I want Mama," Maya whispered. "I want to go home." "Me too," Michael said through his tears. It's okay, Marcus tried to say, even though nothing was okay. We'll be landing soon. We'll see Uncle Marcus and tell him what happened. But the trauma wasn't over. 20 minutes later, the universe decided to show them exactly how deep the racism went. A white child, maybe 9 years old, came running down the aisle from the back of the plane. She was playing, not watching where she was going, holding a cup of orange juice. She crashed into someone's seat, stumbled, and the juice went flying, splashing across the same flight attendant's uniform. More juice than the triplets had spilled, soaking her blouse and skirt. The triplets held their breath, waiting for the explosion, for the violence, for the slaps they knew would come. But they never did. "Oh, sweetie, are you okay?" The flight attendant said, her voice completely different. Concerned. "Did you hurt yourself? Let me help you up." She knelt down, helped the white child to her feet, brushed off her clothes. "Don't worry about the juice, honey. Accidents happen. You're not hurt, are you? No bumps or bruises?" "No, ma'am," the white girl said, looking confused by the fuss. "Well, that's what matters." The flight attendant smiled at her, actually smiled. "You should be more careful next time, okay? But it's all right. These things happen." Marcus, Maya, and Michael watched this interaction with growing horror and understanding. The same woman who had slapped them for a few drops of juice was now comforting a white child who had spilled far more. The same woman who had called them animals was calling this girl sweetie. The same hands that had struck them were gently helping her up. "It's because we're black," Maya whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "She hit us because we're black. That's the only reason." Marcus felt rage and helplessness war in his chest. He pulled out his phone, needing to call his mother, needing an adult who would protect them, who would make this stop. But before he could unlock it, the flight attendant appeared, her expression hard again. "Phones away," she snapped. "Electronic devices need to be stowed." "I need to call my mom," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Please. I need to tell her what happened." The flight attendant snatched the phone from his hand. "You can have it back when we land. Now sit down and be quiet before I have the captain come back here." She moved to Maya and Michael, who were already pulling out their phones with shaking hands. "Hand them over. All of them." Please," Michael begged, tears streaming down his face. "We just want to call our parents. Please don't take our phones." I said now. One by one, she confiscated their phones, their lifeline to their parents, their only way to get help. The triplets sat there stripped of everything. Their dignity, their safety, their ability to call for help. They were trapped at 30,000 feet with no way to contact anyone who could protect them. Maya buried her face in Marcus's shoulder and sobbed. Michael shook with silent crying. Marcus tried to be strong for his siblings, but his own tears fell hot and fast down his face, stinging the red mark where he'd been slapped. "What are we going to do?" Maya whispered. "Nobody's helping us. Nobody cares." Marcus looked around the cabin at all the passengers who were still recording, still watching, still doing nothing. He felt a despair deeper than anything he'd ever known. They were alone. Completely alone. And nobody was coming to save them. The flight attendant walked away with their phones, and the triplets clung to each other in row 12, 3 11-year-old children learning the hardest lesson of their young lives. That the world could be cruel. That adults in authority could hurt you and get away with it. That your black skin made you vulnerable in ways white children would never have to understand. And that sometimes, even when people saw injustice happening right in front of them, they chose their comfort over your suffering. They chose silence over speaking up. They chose to record your pain rather than stop it. That lesson, that heartbreak, would stay with them forever. An hour passed. The longest hour of the triplets' lives. They sat in row 12, still crying quietly, trying not to draw attention to themselves, trying not to give the flight attendant any excuse to hurt them again. Their faces still burned where they'd been slapped. Their hearts felt even more bruised. Marcus kept thinking about their mother. She would be so worried when they didn't call after landing like they'd promised. She would know something was wrong. But by then it would be too late. The damage would already be done. The fear would already be carved into their memories. "I'm scared," Michael whispered for the 10th time. His voice was hoarse from crying. "I just want Mama. I know, buddy, Marcus said, trying to sound brave even though he was just as terrified. We all do. Maya stared at the back of the seat in front of her, replaying the moment with the white child over and over in her mind. The gentle voice. The kind smile. The concern and care that had been given to a white girl for doing the exact same thing they'd done. The stark, undeniable difference in how they'd been treated. Not because of their behavior. Not because of anything they'd done. But because of their skin color. It's not fair, she said quietly, more to herself than her brothers. We're good kids. We follow rules. We're polite. We do everything right. And it doesn't matter. None of it matters because we're black. Marcus didn't know what to say because his sister was right. Their parents had taught them that if they were respectful, if they worked hard, if they were kind and responsible, they'd be treated fairly. But that flight attendant had shown them the painful truth. That for some people, their blackness would always matter more than their character. We need to tell someone, Marcus said suddenly, an idea forming through his despair. We can't just sit here. We need help. Our phones are gone, Michael reminded him, fresh tears starting. She took them all. Then we find someone else's phone, Marcus said, determination replacing some of his fear. There are people on this plane who saw what happened. Maybe someone will help us. Nobody helped before, Maya said bitterly. They just watched and recorded. We have to try, Marcus insisted. We can't just do nothing. He unbuckled his seatbelt, glanced toward the front of the plane where the flight attendant was talking to another crew member. Then he looked back toward economy, toward the rows behind them. Taking a deep breath, he stood up. Where are you going? Maya grabbed his arm, fear in her eyes. To find help, Marcus said. Stay here. I'll be right back. He walked slowly down the aisle, past rows of passengers who'd watched him and his siblings get assaulted. Past the businessman who'd looked away. Past the young woman who'd recorded but not intervened. Past seat after seat of people who'd chosen silence. Some of them looked at him with guilt in their eyes now. Some looked away quickly. None of them offered help. Marcus reached the back of the plane, near the bathrooms where economy class ended. And there, in seat 34B, he saw an elderly black man, maybe 70 years old, reading a newspaper. The man looked up as Marcus approached, and something in his weathered face was kind, understanding. Excuse me, sir, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I really need help. The elderly man set down his newspaper, concern immediately filling his expression. What's wrong, son? And Marcus broke. All the fear and pain and trauma of the past hour came pouring out. The flight attendant hit us. Me and my brother and sister. We're triplets. We're only 11. We didn't do anything wrong. A cup spilled by accident and she slapped us. All three of us. She took our phones so we can't call our parents. Nobody helped us. Everyone just watched. Please, sir, please. I need to call my mom. I need to tell her what happened. The elderly man's face hardened with a fury Marcus recognized. It was the same controlled anger he sometimes saw in his father's eyes when they talked about racism, about injustice, about the ways the world still hurt black people. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone without hesitation. You call your mama right now, the man said, his voice gentle despite his obvious anger. And you tell her everything. Every single thing that happened. Marcus took the phone with shaking hands. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me, son. This is what we do. We help each other when nobody else will. Now call your mama. Marcus dialed his mother's number, the number he'd known by heart since he was old enough to memorize it. It rang once. Twice. Then her voice, warm and familiar and safe. Told, Mama, Marcus sobbed into the phone, all his composure crumbling at the sound of her voice. Mama, something bad happened. Something really bad. Marcus? Baby, what's wrong? Where are you? What happened? The words came out in a rush, broken by sobs. We're on the plane. A flight attendant hit us. She slapped us, Mama. All three of us. Maya and Michael too. We didn't do anything wrong. A cup spilled on her by accident and she hit us. She called us animals. She took our phones. Nobody helped us. Everyone just watched. Mama, I'm so scared. I want to come home. On the other end of the line, Jennifer Carter's world stopped. Her babies. Someone had put their hands on her babies. Someone had hurt her children and nobody had protected them. The rage that flooded through her was primal, protective, absolute. Marcus, baby, listen to me, Jennifer said, her voice deadly calm in the way it got when she was furious beyond measure. Are you safe right now? Is she still hurting you? No, ma'am. We're just sitting here. But she took our phones and nobody will help us. Baby. You did the right thing calling me. Now here's what's going to happen. You go back to your seat with your brother and sister. You tell them Mama knows what happened. Tell them Mama is coming. The plane is landing in Chicago, right? Yes, ma'am. In about 45 minutes. Jennifer was already grabbing her car keys, already heading for the door. I'll be there. I'll be at O'Hare when you land. You stay strong for your sister and brother. You stay together. And you tell Maya and Michael that justice is coming. That woman who hurt you? She's about to learn what happens when you mess with Jennifer Carter's children. Mama, Marcus whispered, hope flooding through him for the first time in an hour. I love you. I love you too, baby. All three of you. I'm coming. Mama's coming. Marcus handed the phone back to the elderly man, who'd been listening with an expression that suggested he'd witnessed too many stories like this in his long life. Thank you, sir. Thank you for helping us. The elderly man put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. Son, I grew up in Mississippi in the 1950s. I know what it's like when the world treats you wrong because of your skin color. And I know what it's like when people stand by and do nothing. You remember this day. Remember the people who didn't help. But also remember that you had the courage to ask for help, and that you found it. That matters. Marcus nodded, wiped his tears, and walked back up the aisle to row 12. Maya and Michael looked up at him with desperate hope in their eyes. I called Mama, Marcus said, sliding back into his seat between his siblings. She knows what happened. She's coming to the airport. She said justice is coming. Maya grabbed her brother's hand, squeezing tight. Really? Really? Marcus pulled both his siblings close. Mama's coming. We just have to hold on a little longer. And for the first time since the slapping, since the racism, since the trauma, the triplets felt a small flicker of hope. Their mother was coming. And when Jennifer Carter arrived, that flight attendant was going to face consequences she couldn't imagine. But the children didn't know yet that their mother was more than just a protective parent. She is a woman married to a man in a position of authority. And when she revealed that truth, everything was going to change. The plane began its descent into Chicago, and the triplets felt their stomachs drop with more than just the change in altitude. 45 minutes had passed since the slapping, 45 minutes of sitting in their seats trying to be invisible, trying not to cry too loudly, trying not to give that flight attendant any reason to hurt them again. Their faces still stung. Their hearts hurt worse. Marcus kept checking the time on the seatback screen in front of him. Every minute felt like an hour. He could see Maya trembling beside him, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold the pieces together. Michael had gone quiet, too quiet, staring at nothing with eyes that looked older than they had that morning. Something had broken in all three of them. Something that might never fully heal. The flight attendant walked past their row again, and all three children flinched. Actually flinched, their bodies reacting to her presence like she was a threat they needed to protect themselves from. She saw their reaction and something that might have been satisfaction crossed her face. She'd made her point. She'd put them in their place. 3 black children who'd learned their lesson about where they belonged. She didn't apologize. Didn't check if they were okay. Didn't acknowledge that she'd committed an act of violence against children. She just walked past like nothing had happened, like their tears and trauma meant nothing, like they meant nothing. Around them, the other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The businessman in the suit kept glancing back at the triplets, guilt written across his face, but he still didn't speak. The young woman who'd recorded everything was staring at her phone, watching the video she'd captured, her expression troubled. But her voice stayed silent. The elderly white couple whispered to each other, shaking their heads, clearly disturbed by what they'd witnessed. But they didn't stand up. Didn't demand accountability. Didn't protect 3 children who'd needed protection. Their discomfort changed nothing. Their guilt helped no one. They'd watched children get assaulted and they'd chosen their own comfort over those children's safety. Now they had to live with that choice. Now they had to look at 3 crying 11-year-olds and know they'd failed the most basic test of human decency. Maya leaned into Marcus, her voice barely a whisper. What if Mama can't fix this? What if nobody believes us? What if she gets in trouble for hitting us and nothing happens to her? Marcus wanted to reassure his sister, but he didn't know what to say. He'd seen the way the world worked. He'd heard his parents talk about cases where black people were hurt and nothing happened to the people who hurt them. Where justice never came. Where the system protected the abusers instead of the victims. Mama will believe us, Marcus said finally, because that much he knew was true. And she's going to do something. I know she will. Michael finally spoke, his voice hollow and broken in a way that made Marcus's chest ache. I don't want to fly anymore. I don't want to go anywhere where people can hurt us and nobody helps. Those words, spoken by an 11-year-old child who should have been excited about adventure and travel and seeing the world, were perhaps the most heartbreaking consequence of what had happened. The flight attendant hadn't just slapped 3 children. She'd stolen something from them. Their sense of safety. Their trust in adults. Their belief that the world was fundamentally fair. She taught them a lesson they should never have had to learn at 11 years old. That their black skin made them vulnerable in ways white children would never understand. The plane dropped lower. The flight attendants prepared the cabin for landing. Through the window, Marcus could see Chicago appearing below them, the city where their mother was waiting, where justice might finally come. But it felt so far away still. They were still trapped in this metal tube with the woman who'd hurt them. Still surrounded by people who'd watched and done nothing. Still powerless. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final descent into Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The captain's voice came through the speakers. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing. The triplets held hands across their seats, the 3 of them connected in their trauma, in their fear, in their desperate hope that when they finally got off this plane, someone would make this right. Someone would see their pain and care. Someone would deliver the justice that every child deserved. The wheels touched down with a thump that jolted through the cabin. Chicago. They'd made it. But the ordeal wasn't over. Not yet. If this story is breaking your heart, if you're feeling the injustice of what these children endured, hit that subscribe button right now. These stories need to be told. These truths need to be exposed. And channels like ours that refuse to stay silent about racism and child abuse need your support to keep fighting. Subscribe because silence is complicity. Subscribe because these children's pain matters. Subscribe because the next time this happens, and it will happen again, we need to make sure the world is watching. Don't let their suffering be in vain. Click that button. Join this community. Stand with us against injustice. The plane taxied toward the gate, and 3 children who'd left Detroit that morning full of joy and excitement now sat broken and traumatized, waiting for their mother to save them, praying that this time, finally, justice would come. The plane rolled to a stop at gate C-17, and the seatbelt sign dinged off. Immediately, passengers began standing, reaching for overhead bins, gathering their belongings with the usual urgency of people eager to deplane. But for Marcus, Maya, and Michael, sitting in row 12, freedom felt impossibly far away. They were in the middle of the plane. Dozens of passengers stood between them and the exit. Dozens of people who'd watched them get assaulted and said nothing now blocked their path to their mother, to safety, to the justice they desperately needed. The irony was cruel. The same people who'd been too cowardly to intervene were now inadvertently extending their suffering by simply existing in the way. Maya started crying again, fresh tears streaming down her already swollen face. I can't do this anymore. I can't sit here. I need Mama. I need her right now. I know, Marcus whispered, his own voice thick with barely controlled emotion. Just a little longer. Just hold on a little longer. But a little longer felt like forever. The line of passengers moved with agonizing slowness. An elderly man struggled with his carry-on bag. A family with small children took their time gathering scattered toys and sippy cups. A businessman had trouble getting his luggage down from the overhead bin. Each delay was normal, understandable, the usual chaos of deplaning. But for 3 traumatized children, every second felt like torture. And through it all, The flight attendant who'd assaulted them stood near the exit door, smiling and thanking passengers as they left. Have a great day in Chicago. Thanks for flying with us. Enjoy your stay. Her voice was pleasant, professional, like she hadn't just committed an act of violence against children. Like everything was normal. Like she'd done nothing wrong. Michael watched her through the gaps between standing passengers, and something dark settled in his chest. She's going to get away with it. Look at her. She doesn't even care. She's not worried at all. Marcus followed his brother's gaze and felt his own despair deepen. Michael was right. The flight attendant looked completely unbothered, confident, secure in her position of authority. She'd assaulted 3 black children in front of 40 witnesses, and she wasn't afraid of consequences because she probably knew, from experience, from a lifetime of getting away with treating black people badly, that consequences rarely came for people like her. The line moved forward. Row 15 deplaned. Then row 14. Then row 13. The triplets gathered their small backpacks with shaking hands, preparing to finally escape this nightmare. But their bodies felt heavy, weighed down by trauma and exhaustion and the crushing realization of how powerless they'd been. As row 12 finally stood up, as they stepped into the aisle, Maya's legs almost gave out. Marcus caught her, held her up. We're almost there. Mama's right outside. Just a few more steps. They moved forward slowly, the 3 of them staying close together, protective of each other in a way they'd never had to be before. Other passengers glanced at them, at their tear-stained faces and red cheeks, and quickly looked away. Guilt was written across so many faces. Discomfort. Shame. But still, even now, no one spoke up. No one asked if they were okay. No one acknowledged what had happened. The businessman who'd looked away caught Marcus's eye for a brief second. I'm sorry, he mouthed silently, but the words meant nothing. Sorry didn't help when they'd needed help. Sorry didn't protect them when they'd needed protection. Sorry was just a word people said to make themselves feel better about their own cowardice. The triplets reached the front of the plane. They had to walk right past the flight attendant, right past the woman who'd hurt them. She looked down at them with cold eyes, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might say something cruel one last time. But she just smiled, a thin, satisfied smile that said she knew she'd won. Goodbye, she said sweetly, her voice dripping with false kindness for the benefit of any passengers still within earshot. I hope you learned something today. Those words hit Marcus like another slap. Learn something. Yes, they'd learned something. They'd learned that adults could abuse their authority and face no consequences. They'd learned that being black meant being vulnerable in ways white children never had to fear. They'd learned that justice was something you couldn't count on, that protection wasn't guaranteed, that the system wasn't designed to keep children like them safe. Maya pushed past the flight attendant without looking at her, tears streaming faster now. Michael followed, his small body shaking. Marcus came last, and as he passed, he looked up at the woman who'd hurt them and said quietly, "My mama's waiting. And she's going to make this right." The flight attendant's smile faltered for just a second. Then she recovered, her expression hardening. "Sure she's, sweetie. You have a nice day now." Marcus walked through the jetway, his siblings just ahead of him, and with each step closer to the gate, he felt the anticipation building. Their mother was there. She knew what happened. She'd promised justice was coming. In just seconds, they'd see her. In just seconds, everything would change. The jetway opened into the gate area. Bright lights. The bustle of O'Hare International Airport. The sounds of announcements and rolling luggage and hundreds of travelers moving through the terminal. And there, standing at the gate entrance, her eyes scanning desperately for her children, was Jennifer Carter. "Mama," Maya sobbed, and broke into a run. The 3 triplets rushed toward their mother, and Jennifer Carter's face crumpled when she saw them. Saw their tear-stained faces. Saw the red marks still visible on their cheeks. Saw the trauma written across their expressions. Saw her babies broken in ways they hadn't been when she'd kissed them goodbye that morning. She dropped to her knees right there in the middle of O'Hare Airport and wrapped all 3 children in her arms, holding them so tight it almost hurt. But it was the good kind of hurt. The safe kind. The kind that said they were protected now. They were loved. Someone was finally going to fight for them. My babies, Jennifer whispered, her voice breaking. My babies. Mama's here. Mama's got you. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. And for the first time since that cup had spilled, since that first slap had echoed through the cabin, since their world had shattered at 30,000 feet, the triplets felt something other than fear and pain. They felt hope. Because their mother was here. And Jennifer Carter was about to show that flight attendant and every passenger who'd stood by and done nothing exactly what happened when you hurt her children. The reckoning was coming. And it was going to be devastating. Jennifer Carter held her children for a long moment, feeling them shake against her, feeling their tears soak into her shirt, feeling the way they clung to her like drowning victims who'd finally found something solid to hold on to. Around them, travelers walked past, some glancing over with concern, most just hurrying to their own gates, their own lives, their own problems. But Jennifer didn't care about any of them. Her entire world was these 3 broken children in her arms. Tell me everything, she said softly, pulling back just enough to look at their faces, to see the red marks that made her blood boil. Tell Mama exactly what happened. The words tumbled out between sobs. Marcus tried to explain about the juice, about the accident, about how he'd apologized. Maya described the slaps, demonstrated how hard they'd been hit, how the flight attendant had called them animals. Michael, his voice breaking over and over, told her about the white girl who'd spilled even more juice and been treated with kindness and care. About how they'd realized it wasn't about the spill at all. It was about their skin color. She took our phones, Marcus said, his voice cracking. We couldn't call you. We were trapped up there with her and nobody helped us, Mama. Nobody. They all just watched. Jennifer Carter listened to every word, and with each detail, her fury grew. But it was a cold fury now. Controlled. Calculated. The kind of anger that didn't explode but instead hardened into something sharp and precise and devastating. She'd driven 2 hours from Detroit at speeds that probably should have gotten her pulled over. She'd called her husband from the car. She'd prepared for war. And now, seeing her babies' faces, hearing their trauma, she was ready to deliver it. Where is she? Jennifer asked, her voice deadly calm. Where is this flight attendant? Marcus pointed toward the jetway. She's still on the plane. Saying goodbye to passengers. Jennifer stood up, took her children's hands. You 3 stay right here. Right here where I can see you. Don't move. Mama's going to handle this. Mama, be careful, Maya whispered, fear in her eyes. She's mean. Jennifer looked down at her daughter, and her expression softened for just a moment. Baby girl, she's about to learn what mean really looks like. Jennifer Carter walked toward the jetway with purpose in every step. She was a tall woman, 5'9", and when she was angry, she carried herself in a way that made people move out of her path. Passengers still deplaning saw her coming and instinctively stepped aside. There was something in her expression, in the set of her shoulders, that said this woman was on a mission and nothing was going to stop her. She reached the entrance to the jetway just as the flight attendant appeared, laughing at something another crew member had said. The flight attendant saw Jennifer and her smile faded slightly, some instinct telling her this wasn't just another passenger with a complaint about legroom or a delayed bag. Excuse me, Jennifer said, her voice cutting through the noise of the terminal. Are you the flight attendant who was working first class on this flight? The woman's expression turned defensive, guarded. I work the whole cabin. Can I help you with something? Jennifer stepped closer, and her voice dropped lower, more controlled, more dangerous. You put your hands on my children. You slapped 3 11-year-old kids. You called them animals. You confiscated their phones so they couldn't call for help. And I want to hear what you have to say for yourself. The flight attendant's face hardened. Her posture shifted into something aggressive, confrontational. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't concerned. She was indignant that she was being questioned at all. Your children, she said, emphasis on the word like it was an accusation, spilled juice on my uniform and showed no respect when I corrected them. Corrected them? Jennifer's voice rose slightly, the control slipping for just a second. You hit them. You assaulted 3 children. I disciplined children who were misbehaving, the flight attendant shot back. Maybe if their mother had taught them proper manners, they wouldn't need correction from strangers. The insult hit Jennifer like a physical blow, but she didn't react. Not yet. She took a breath, steadied herself. My children are honor roll students. They volunteer at church. They've been taught respect and kindness their entire lives. What they did was have a minor accident. What you did was commit assault. The flight attendant laughed, actually laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Of course you'd play the victim card. That's what you people always do. Your kids cause problems and then you come crying racism when there are consequences. You people. The words hung in the air, confirming everything the triplets had already learned on that plane. This wasn't about juice or manners or behavior. This had always been about race. About a white woman who saw black children as problems to be controlled, as threats to be disciplined, as less than human. Jennifer felt something cold settle in her chest. She'd experienced racism her whole life. Subtle racism. Systemic racism. The kind that hid behind policies and procedures and polite language. But this? This naked, open hatred? This woman who'd hurt her babies and felt justified doing it? This was something else entirely. Do you know who I am? Jennifer asked quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made nearby passengers stop and listen. The flight attendant crossed her arms, a smug smile playing at her lips. Should I? Let me guess. You want to speak to my supervisor? You're going to write a strongly worded complaint? File a report that'll go nowhere? Who can a black woman be? The flight attendant continued, her voice dripping with contempt. Another angry mother making accusations she can't prove? Another person playing the race card because she doesn't want to admit her children were out of control? She actually laughed again, confident, secure in her position, in her authority, in the system she knew protected people like her. Around them, passengers had stopped moving. Phones were coming out again. People were recording. But this time, they were about to witness something very different. Jennifer Carter reached into her purse slowly, deliberately. Her hands were steady even though rage was coursing through her veins. She pulled out a small leather wallet, opened it, and held up an identification card for the flight attendant to see. The flight attendant leaned forward to read it, her expression still smug, still dismissive. Then her eyes focused on the words. On the name. On the title. And the color drained from her face like someone had opened a valve and let all the blood run out. The ID card was simple. Professional. It read, Jennifer Carter, Executive Director of Passenger Relations. And below that in smaller letters, spouse of CEO, David Mitchell. David Mitchell. CEO of the entire airline. The man whose name was on every company memo. Whose face was in every employee training video. Whose authority was absolute. And Jennifer Carter was his wife. These 3 children she'd assaulted, these black kids she'd called animals and slapped and humiliated, they were the CEO's children. The flight attendant's mouth opened but no sound came out. Her smugness evaporated, replaced by something that looked like pure terror. Her hands started shaking. The confidence that had carried her through assaulting 3 children and defending her actions crumbled in an instant. Still think I'm just another black woman whose complaints go nowhere? Jennifer asked, her voice soft but lethal. Still think my children don't matter? Still think there won't be consequences? The flight attendant stumbled backward, her face now completely white. She stammered. I didn't know, I had no idea, if I'd known who they were. Jennifer held up her hand, cutting her off. So, right there. If you'd known who they were? So you're saying it's acceptable to assault black children as long as they're not connected to someone important? As long as they're just regular black kids whose parents don't have power? The flight attendant's silence was answer enough. Jennifer pulled out her phone, and her fingers moved with practiced ease. She dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang twice, then a man's voice answered. Concerned. Already angry because she'd called him from the car and told him what happened. David, Jennifer said, her eyes never leaving the flight attendant's terrified face. I'm at gate C-17. Our children are standing here with marks on their faces from where they were slapped. The woman who hit them is standing in front of me. And she just asked me who a black woman could possibly be. There was a pause. Then David Mitchell's voice came through the phone, and even though it was just a speaker, even though he was somewhere else in the airport, his fury was palpable. I'm 10 minutes away. Don't let her leave. I want to see the woman who put her hands on my children. Jennifer ended the call and looked at the flight attendant, who now looked like she might faint. My husband is coming. And you're going to explain to him, to your CO, why you thought it was acceptable to assault his children. Why you thought being black meant they deserved to be hit. Why you felt so confident that you'd face no consequences that you laughed in my face when I confronted you. The flight attendant opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Tears were forming in her eyes now. Real fear. The kind of fear the triplets had felt for over an hour. The kind of powerlessness they'd experienced when she'd taken their phones and their dignity and their sense of safety. Please, the flight attendant finally whispered. Please, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But Jennifer Carter wasn't interested in apologies that only came after consequences appeared. She wasn't moved by tears that only fell when someone's career was on the line. She looked at this woman who'd hurt her babies and felt nothing but cold satisfaction that justice was finally coming. You should have thought about sorry when you raised your hand to hit children, Jennifer said. You should have thought about sorry when you called them animals. You should have thought about sorry when you saw them crying and felt proud of yourself for putting them in their place. But now it's too late for sorry. Now you're going to face exactly what you deserve. And in the distance, through the crowds of travelers, Jennifer could see her husband striding toward gate C-17 with security officers flanking him on both sides. David Mitchell was coming. The CO was coming. And the reckoning was about to be complete. David Mitchell arrived at gate C-17 like a storm given human form. He was a tall man, 6'3", impeccably dressed even at this late hour, his dark skin and sharp suit commanding immediate attention. Behind him walked 2 airport security officers and the airport manager, all of them moving with the kind of urgency that made travelers part like the Red Sea. But David Mitchell's eyes weren't on the crowd. They were searching for his children. And when he spotted them standing near their mother, when he saw their tear-stained faces and the red marks still visible on their cheeks, something broke in his expression. This man who ran an entire airline, who made million-dollar decisions daily, who commanded respect from thousands of employees, looked for a moment like he might break down completely. He crossed to them in long strides, dropped to one knee, and gathered all 3 children into his arms. "Daddy's here," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Daddy's got you now. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this happened to you." Marcus buried his face in his father's shoulder and sobbed. "We didn't do anything wrong, Daddy. We were good. We promised Mama we'd be good." "I know, son. I know you were." David held his children for a long moment, and Jennifer watched her husband's face transform. The tenderness shifted into something harder, colder, more dangerous. He stood up slowly, his full height and authority restored, and turned to face the flight attendant who'd been standing frozen in place, watched by dozens of passengers who'd gathered to witness this confrontation. The flight attendant's face was ashen. Her hands trembled at her sides. She knew who David Mitchell was. Every employee knew. His face was on the company website, in training materials, in quarterly newsletters. She'd seen him before in corporate videos talking about customer service and company values and treating every passenger with dignity and respect. And now he was standing in front of her, and his children, the children she'd assaulted, were his children. "You?" David said, his voice low and controlled but carrying absolute authority. "You put your hands on my children. On babies. On 11-year-old kids who were traveling to see family." The flight attendant's mouth opened but nothing came out. What could she possibly say? What excuse could make this right? "Sir, I didn't know," she finally stammered. "I had no idea they were your children. If I'd known." David held up his hand, cutting her off. "So, right there. You didn't know they were my children, so you felt comfortable hitting them? You're telling me that assaulting black children is acceptable as long as they're not connected to someone important?" "No, sir, that's not what I meant," she backpedaled desperately. "I just meant..." "What did you mean?" David's voice rose slightly. "That black children without powerful parents deserve to be slapped? That racism is fine as long as the victims can't fight back?" Passengers who'd been on the flight were watching now, and their expressions had shifted. Guilt. Shame. Horror. They were seeing themselves through David Mitchell's eyes. Seeing their silence. Their complicity. Their choice to record but not intervene. And they were realizing they'd failed these children just as surely as the flight attendant had. I want the names of every passenger who witnessed this and did nothing, David said to the security officers. I want statements from every single person who watched my children get assaulted and chose to stay silent. And I want this woman escorted off airport property immediately. The flight attendant's knees buckled slightly. Please, she whispered. Please, I have a family. I need this job. I made a mistake. My children will remember this day for the rest of their lives, David said quietly, and his words carried more weight than if he'd shouted. They'll remember being hit by an adult who was supposed to protect them. They'll remember 40 people watching and doing nothing. They'll remember learning that their black skin makes them vulnerable in ways white children never have to fear. Your job? Your comfort? Your family? Those things don't matter to me right now. What matters is justice for 3 traumatized children who deserved better. He turned to the airport manager. I want her employment terminated immediately. I want a full investigation into every complaint ever filed against her. And I want new training protocols implemented across the entire airline about racial bias and the treatment of children. This ends today. The reckoning had come. And it was absolute. The airport manager stepped forward, his expression grave. Ms. Henderson, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. Your employee credentials are revoked. The flight attendant, Ms. Henderson, collapsed against the wall, her face crumbling. 22 years, she sobbed. I've worked for this airline for 22 years. Please, Mr. Mitchell, please give me another chance. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever you want. You had your chance to apologize, Jennifer said coldly. When I first confronted you. But you chose to insult me instead. You chose to laugh and ask who a black woman could possibly be. You showed us exactly who you are. David turned to the passengers who'd been on the flight, many still lingering, watching with phones out. Some of you recorded what happened to my children. Yet not one of you spoke up. Not one of you protected 3 kids being assaulted right in front of you. A middle-aged white man in a business suit stepped forward, shame written across his face. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I was afraid. I didn't want to cause a scene. I thought someone else would say something. I was wrong. I failed your children and I'll have to live with that. Your fear mattered more than their safety, David said quietly. Your comfort mattered more than 3 children crying for help. I want you to think about that. I want every person who witnessed this and stayed silent to think about what that silence cost. A young woman was openly crying now. I recorded it, she admitted. I thought if I had evidence, it would help. But I should have done more. I should have stopped her. I'm so sorry. Maya looked at all these adults apologizing now, after everything was over, after her father had arrived with power and authority. Where were you when we needed you? She asked, her small voice cutting through the noise. Where were you when she was hitting us? The silence that followed was devastating. No one had an answer that could justify their inaction. David addressed the airport manager again. I want every employee retrained on racial bias. I want new protocols for reporting discrimination. I want passengers to know that silence in the face of injustice makes them complicit. And I want the names of every silent witness today in my office tomorrow morning. But even as justice was delivered, even as the flight attendant was escorted away in tears, even as policies were promised and changes were made, the damage remained. Marcus still flinched when anyone raised their hand too quickly. Maya still had nightmares about being trapped on that plane. Michael still asked why people hated them for being black. Justice had come. But it came too late to prevent the trauma. Too late to erase the lesson those children had learned about how the world saw them. The flight attendant lost her job. But 3 11-year-old children lost something far more precious. They lost their innocence. They lost their sense of safety. They lost the belief that being good and kind and respectful would protect them from racism's violence. David and Jennifer wrapped their arms around their triplets right there in the terminal, and Jennifer whispered the heartbreaking truth. This won't be the last time, babies. The world is going to be hard on you because of your beautiful black skin. But Mama and Daddy will always fight for you, boys. And that was the imperfect resolution. Justice served, but scars remained. Consequences delivered, but innocence stolen. The flight attendant punished, but the 3 children forever changed. Real life didn't offer perfect endings. It offered survival, resilience, and the painful knowledge that tomorrow, somewhere else, another black child would need someone to stand up for them too. The question was, would anyone be brave enough to do it? 3 months have passed since that day at Gate C-17. The video recorded by passengers went viral, sparking nationwide conversations about racism in air travel and the complicity of silent bystanders. Ms. Henderson's termination made headlines. The airline implemented sweeping changes to their discrimination policies and employee training programs. But for Marcus, Maya, and Michael Carter, the real story isn't about viral videos or policy changes. It's about the nightmares Maya still has. It's about how Marcus freezes every time he sees a flight attendant uniform. It's about Michael asking his parents why some people think black children deserve to be hurt. David and Jennifer have watched their once carefree children become cautious, hyper-aware, carrying a burden no 11-year-old should bear. They've started therapy. They've had countless conversations about racism, about resilience, about how their blackness is beautiful even when the world treats it as a threat. They're healing. Slowly. Imperfectly. The way real trauma heals. The triplets did make it to their uncle's naming ceremony. They held those baby twins and smiled for pictures and tried to reclaim some of the joy that flight had stolen from them. But they flew with both parents this time. And they probably always will. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, if it broke your heart, then do something with that feeling by liking this video. Also, subscribe to this channel because we're committed to exposing racism wherever it hides, even at 30,000 feet. Like this video if you believe every child deserves protection regardless of their skin color. Share it with someone who needs to understand that racism isn't history, it's happening right now, every single day. And if you witnessed injustice today, if you saw someone being mistreated and you stayed silent, let this story haunt you. Let it change you. Let it make you brave enough to speak up next time. Because there will be a next time. There's always a next time. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is. Tell us your own story if you've experienced discrimination. Tell us if this video changed how you'll respond when you witness racism. We're reading every single comment because your voice matters. Your story matters. Your courage to speak up matters. Marcus, Maya, and Michael Carter are still here. Still strong. Still black. Still beautiful. Still deserving of every protection and dignity this world should offer children. Their story didn't end perfectly, but it ended with truth. With accountability. With the uncomfortable reality that we all have to do better. The airline changed their policies. But the real question is, will you change yours? Will you be the person who speaks up? Will you be the one who protects vulnerable children when everyone else chooses comfort over courage? 3 children were slapped on a plane while 40 people watched. Only one elderly black man offered help. Be better than the other 39. Be the person who intervenes. Be the voice that refuses to stay silent. Speak up. Because the next child who needs protection might not have a CEO for a father. They might just have you. And that has to be enough. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for refusing to let stories like this be forgotten. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we expose the truth about racism in America. This is Hyper Racism Channel, and we're not staying quiet. See you in the next video. Stay strong. Stay vigilant. And never, ever stay silent in the face of injustice.